At 2:14, roughly 480 kilometers south of Iceland, the silence of the Atlantic was broken by an unmistakable acoustic signal not heard at this level since the Cold War. A Russian Kilo-class submarine switched on active sonar and focused its torpedo systems on a U.S. vessel in a move that signaled clear hostile intent. The Russian captain likely believed he controlled the situation, not realizing that a U.S. Navy destroyer was already tracking every move in the darkness, ready to respond in a way that could reshape the balance of the encounter in less than a minute and a half. Moscow appeared to be wagering a billion-dollar submarine on a gamble, while Washington was fully prepared to answer. What followed became a tense maritime chess match that sent shockwaves through Russia's inner circles. To understand why America's real strength goes far beyond headlines, you have to look at moments like this. It is not just about raw force. It is about a constant, disciplined, highly engineered system that leaves almost no room for error from an opponent. The confrontation had actually started weeks earlier when the Belawan, a vessel already identified by the U.S. State Department as part of oil shipments linked to Iranian networks and regional destabilization, tried to exploit a legal gray area in the Caribbean. For the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard, this was never just about a single ship. It was about protecting the credibility of international law and safeguarding the trillions of dollars in global trade that depend on secure sea lanes. The Kremlin, under growing pressure to keep its shadow fleet of more than 1,000 aging tankers operating in support of its struggling economy and military effort, took the extraordinary step of retroactively registering the previously stateless vessel as a Russian sovereign asset while it was already at sea. It was a move that looked less like confidence and more like desperation, a legal last-minute play designed to force U.S. commanders into a brutal dilemma. Let the cargo continue or risk a direct confrontation with a nuclear-armed state. For veterans watching this unfold, it likely felt familiar, echoing the dangerous naval cat-and-mouse contests of the 1980s, only now layered with modern electronic warfare, legal maneuvering, and information operations. The tension was real, and every decision carried global consequences. Even as the U.S. Coast Guard refused to back down in the face of Russian pressure, Moscow's broader strategy looked shaky. By sending a submarine and surface escorts to shield a civilian tanker, Russia was trying to project the image of a global navy capable of defending its interests far from home. But to American observers, the weakness behind that display was easy to see. The Russian Northern Fleet is operating under strain, limited budgets, and mounting pressure, using intimidation to mask the reality that sanctions are squeezing the same system these tankers are trying to sustain. The motive is straightforward: survival. Every barrel that reaches port buys more time and more resources. Russia appeared to believe that by escalating the danger and inserting a submarine into the situation, the United States would hesitate and step back rather than risk a larger crisis. In effect, they were trying to use the Marinara, a 600-foot wall of steel and oil, as a shield. State media also pushed edited footage of the pursuit in an effort to portray the U.S. Coast Guard as the aggressor against a peaceful civilian vessel. But that narrative quickly falls apart when measured against the ship's dark AIS profile and questionable registration history. Russia was probing for weakness in the NATO perimeter, not realizing it was sailing straight into one of the most advanced surveillance and response systems ever assembled at sea. The technical imbalance in this encounter was extraordinary, beginning with the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Oscar Austin, a 9,300-ton warship built around the Aegis combat system. While the Russian Kilo-class submarine depends on stealth and quiet movement for survival, Oscar Austin's AN/S, PY-1D phased array radar, and AN/S QQ-89 V-15 undersea warfare suite effectively turned the surrounding ocean into a transparent battle space. The destroyer carries Mark 54 lightweight torpedoes, designed for diesel-electric submarines in difficult waters, along with the RUM-139 vertical launch ASROC, a system capable of delivering an anti-submarine strike to a target area in under 90 seconds from miles away. Above the scene, a P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, one of the most advanced submarine hunting platforms ever fielded, deployed a field of 32 sonobuoys. Building a digital detection grid, the Russian captain had little chance of slipping through. Its Raytheon APY-10 radar is sensitive enough to detect even a submarine snorkel from long range, including in rough seas. While Russian forces were relying on older tactical habits, the U.S. Navy was operating across a fully integrated, multi-domain network where sensors from seabed systems to satellites fed one seamless chain of awareness and response. The Kilo class may be quiet, but its propulsion still produces a distinct acoustic fingerprint, one the U.S. Navy has studied and cataloged for decades. The sound of its pumps, the rhythm of its propeller, the tiny mechanical patterns hidden inside its movement, all of it is familiar. This was not an even contest. It was a demonstration of how scientific precision and long-term preparation translate into sea control. The most dramatic moment came at 3:45, when the Russian submarine made one final, risky move. It began a rapid ascent, apparently hoping to break the surface and intimidate the nearby U.S. Coast Guard vessel. But Oscar Austin was already in position and had anticipated the maneuver before the Russian ballast tanks had fully done their work. As the 4,000-ton kilo surfaced like a black mass in the Atlantic, it emerged directly into the sights of Oscar Austin's 5-inch Mark 45 naval gun, while close-in defensive systems were already tracking it. The American commander did not flinch. He held course with disciplined precision at a steady 18 knots, passing within less than 500 yards of both the tanker's weathered hull and the submarine's dark, wet sail. Inside the Combat Information Center, the atmosphere remained calm and methodical, a sharp contrast to the urgent Russian radio traffic demanding that the United States end what they called an unlawful pursuit. No shot needed to be fired. The U.S. simply made it unmistakably clear that it controlled the environment. Then, when a second destroyer, USS Donald Cook, appeared on the horizon, the Russian surface escorts immediately understood that the balance had shifted beyond recovery. The so-called black hole of the Kilo class was now trapped on the surface, its stealth gone, its edge erased by the arrival of a better prepared and better networked opponent. In that instant, the Russian captain likely understood the mission was over. The fallout left the Kremlin facing embarrassment and a serious loss of credibility. State media could try to spin the episode as a successful defense of a civilian vessel, but naval professionals saw the reality. A Russian submarine had been forced to surface and photographed by the very ships it was supposed to pressure. The Marinara, despite its new name and sudden flag, remained under close NATO watch as it moved toward the North Sea. These Shadow Fleet tankers are more than a sanctions issue. Many are over 15 years old, poorly maintained and weakly insured, making them an environmental risk as much as a geopolitical one. Washington's message was unmistakable. Legal status cannot be invented mid-voyage to bypass international rules. Other seas tankers have already shown that enforcement pressure is real. Rather than forcing the West to retreat, Russia's escalation only triggered a stronger Allied response, including additional U.S. deployments in the region and F-35 coverage in Northern Europe to reinforce air superiority. The cost to Moscow for this failed escort operation ran into the millions, but the reputational damage may have been even greater. Russia played its hand, and the U.S. Navy answered with overwhelming clarity. The larger lesson from this confrontation is hard to ignore. In modern maritime operations, speed of information, technical integration, and crew discipline can matter more than any single platform or weapon. Moscow learned again that reckless escalation has limits, especially when it collides with an opponent that has spent generations refining command at sea. Russia tried to turn an aging tanker into a geopolitical piece on the board, but overlooked one basic fact. The U.S. Navy has spent 75 years mastering the mission of keeping sea lanes open and enforcing the rules that govern them. The lesson is simple. Never enter a technological contest against an adversary that already wrote the playbook and perfected the tools. Control of the seas belongs to those who command them with precision, not to those who try to hide behind false flags and improvise narratives. Looking at the empty deck of the Marinara and the fading wake of the submarine as it withdrew, the message becomes clear. Security depends on constant vigilance and on the steady resolve of those who stand watch when the stakes are highest. At first light, as the North Atlantic fog began to lift, the contrast became even more striking. The Marinara, with peeling paint and black smoke rising from old engines, looked like a relic from another era beside the sharp, modern lines of USS Oscar Austin. The American crew, many of them descendants of families whose history reaches back to earlier Atlantic campaigns, moved with the quiet focus that comes only from relentless training. They were not just operating a warship, they were representing a national standard of discipline and readiness. When the Russian Kilo submerged again, it did so under the close attention of sonar operators in Oscar Austin's Combat Information Center, who were tracking nearly every movement. Changes in depth, course, and speed were recorded and transmitted in real time back to Norfolk and the Pentagon. Russia's attempt at maskirovka, deception, and concealment failed because in the modern undersea battle space, true secrecy is increasingly difficult against an opponent with the right sensors and data fusion. This episode also underscored the growing coordination between the United States and its North Atlantic allies. While Oscar Austin took the lead, British Merlin helicopters and French frigates were also part of the wider surveillance and response network in the region. That is what the Kremlin likely fears most, not just American capability, but the combined strength of an alliance that shares intelligence, tactics, and purpose. The Shadow Fleet is not only a Russian issue, it is a broader threat to maritime safety, environmental stability, and the global economy. These aging tankers, often running without proper maintenance or credible insurance, pose a serious danger to every coastline and commercial route they pass. By intercepting the Marinara, the U.S. Navy was not only enforcing sanctions, it was also protecting oceans, shipping lanes, and the livelihoods tied to them. The restraint shown by American commanders, even when confronted at close range by a surface submarine, reflected a core advantage of professional military power: confidence without recklessness. They were not seeking a wider clash, but they made it clear they were prepared for any escalation. Looking ahead, Moscow may continue resorting to these kinds of risky moves as its room to maneuver narrows. But every such operation also hands the US and NATO something valuable: intelligence. Every sonar pulse, radio transmission, and maneuver adds to a growing library of operational data. In trying to look strong, Russia exposed more of its methods and weaknesses. In the end, the Marinara may still reach port or be forced to turn away, but the broader outcome is already set. The attempt to move through the shadows has been met with exposure, pressure, and overwhelming visibility. The message to the world remains direct: the international order will be defended, and those who try to undermine it through deception and intimidation may find themselves exactly where that submarine did: visible, outmatched, and backing away. That is modern sea power, and it remains a defining reality as long as the U.S. Navy continues guarding the critical gateways of global trade and security. As the ships eventually separated, Oscar Austin turned back toward its patrol station, its crew already resetting for whatever contact might come next. For them, this was simply another mission in the long work of preserving stability through strength. For everyone watching from afar, it was a reminder that the ocean is still one of the ultimate arenas of power. Systems like Aegis, platforms like the P-8A, and the composure of highly trained sailors remain the line between order and disorder. The tanker Marinara may continue sailing for now, but its voyage has already become a case study in what happens when declining power meets superior preparation. It is a story of misplaced confidence running headfirst into disciplined capability. For those who have served and for those who understand the weight carried by command at sea, this was a lesson in modern naval statecraft. We will keep following developments like this closely, focusing on the technical details and tactical realities that often get lost in the noise. The Shadow Fleet may be expanding, but so is the reach of the forces determined to monitor it. Stay alert, stay informed, and remember, when the stakes rise as high as the North Atlantic swells, excellence is never optional.